Do you have a favorite annual flower you are looking forward to planting this spring? Well, today we're diving into a flower that refuses to be ignored. The bright, the bold, the zinnia. From the sun-baked grasslands of Mexico to astronauts carefully tending petals in orbit above the Earth, these flowers have a history as vibrant as their blooms, including a shared history with the elusive color blue.
If you've ever stood in the seed aisle in late winter holding many flower packets, this episode is for you. Today we're talking about starting annual flowers from seed, how to do it well, how to avoid the common mistakes, and how to grow plants that actually look garden center worthy by planting time.
Hello and welcome to the Petal and Plot Pod, a seasonal plant stories and garden tips podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Anissa.
And this is Eric.
Zinnias originate in what is now Mexico, where they grew wild across dry grasslands and open plains. They were tough, scrappy plants, adapted to heat, poor soil, and inconsistent rain. In some regional oral traditions, zinnia-like wildflowers were described more generally rather than given a single fixed name, something like bright field flowers or sun-colored blossoms in the Nahuatl-based descriptions, reflecting how indigenous naming often emphasized function and visual identity over strict classification. During Spanish colonialism, they were referred to as mal de ojos, meaning sickness of the eyes. But not because the plant was harmful, it was because it was intensely bright, almost glaring colors were said to strain the eyes when viewed in large patches. Interestingly, Carl Linnaeus later botanically named the genus Zinnia to honor his friend Johann Zinn, who made a major contribution to the science of writing a book detailing the anatomy of the human eye. I guess related but unrelated facts. Zinnias have also been traditionally used by the Navajo for their anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, and antifungal properties. They were applied to wounds, sores, and skin irritations, or used in teas to treat, for instance, stomach pain. And their properties include antioxidant effects that support skin health, too. You know what podcast I would love to listen to? Like a podcast about tea. I might have to look around.
There's a lot of things you can make tea out of, isn't there?
Yeah,
I mean, I
so
feel like
much.
hearing you talk about zinnia, I had no idea I could probably be utilizing that for other purposes other than late summer
Yeah,
bloomer.
I think it's a bit bitter, but there's this. She calls herself a tea sommelier that I've seen on TikTok, where she makes teas that are super interesting, and she has like a whole formula, and they usually have like 3 to 4 ingredients. Maybe she has a podcast. I'll have to go look
Yeah,
and see.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, now let's fast forward to space travel. Zinnias became one of the first flowering plants successfully grown aboard the International Space Station as part of experiments led by NASA. So why zinnias? Well, because they're super tough, but they're also kind of sensitive, so they will show stress. And that combo makes them the perfect test subjects for learning how plants respond to space conditions. But growing flowers in space isn't as simple as planting a seed. In microgravity, water doesn't drain. It clings and it floats. Roots don't know which way is down, air circulation is limited, and moisture can build up dangerously, leading to mold. And that's exactly what happened. In 2015, astronauts noticed that their zinnias were struggling. The leaves were curling, mold was spreading, and the experiment was at risk of failure. So astronaut Scott Kelly took on a more hands-on approach. Instead of strictly following ground control instructions, he adjusted watering and airflow himself, basically becoming the first space gardener making judgment calls in orbit.
I was
And it
just going to
worked.
say, he probably made us really proud because I was about to raise my hand and all that. And I was going to be like, okay, no one was a gardener to be like, hey, something can't just sit in water the whole time. I mean, I was happy that he figured it out for them.
Well, wait, remember that story about how NASA sent a group of women on a mission up in space for 7 days and sent 100 tampons with them?
Yeah.
There was a song written about it. Someone could have Googled that. And what he did worked. The zinnias recovered, they grew, and then something no one had seen before, They bloomed in space, bright orange petals unfolding nearly 250 miles above Earth. Those blooms weren't just beautiful, they were proof that humans could grow complex, flowering plants in space, a critical step forward to the future missions to the moon and to Mars and beyond, where astronauts will ultimately need to grow their own food and maybe a few flowers for morale. Do you ever feel frustrated by the fact that we can't travel very far in space as humans yet, Eric?
I don't know. Maybe. I think just because, technology and the human race and everything always seems like it's speeding up and compounding and moving faster. But yeah, sometimes it feels like we should be living on Mars by now, right?
Right?
Just
I
crazy to
mean,
think of, really. But
yeah. I don't personally wanna go to space, like, I would prefer to stay here in the dirt, but the universe is, like, so mind-bogglingly big, I wanna know more about it, and I feel like, yeah, like you said, at this point, why are we not farther out there?
yeah,
Well, back here on Earth, zinnias remain one of the easiest and most rewarding flowers to grow. They come in almost every color except true blue. So you can find them in red, pink, yellow, orange, purple, white, and even green, but they cannot produce blue pigments. Blue is such a rare color in nature, aside from the sea and sky, of course. I know I'm obsessed with growing true blue flowers in my garden. How about you, Eric?
my gosh, they're so pretty. But naturally, blue is just not a very common flower color, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you do have certain plants that have that blue tone, yeah, it just really stands out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you're right. I was just thinking about it, like what zinnias have I ever grown or seen seed packets of, and blue has not hit the market yet.
Every other color but blue. Blue is such an elusive color in nature in general, and it's also one of the most difficult colors to make into tattoo ink, which I find is kind of an interesting parallel. When you look back at old sailor tattoos, they're only in black, red, orange, and yellow because there was no blue ink that lasted and therefore could not make green or purple. Across tattooing nations like Polynesia, Japan, artists primarily worked with black, red, and sometimes brown pigments that were made from materials that were stable to the skin, non toxic or at least survivable, and materials that they could easily find. So, like black came from soot or charcoal, red came from iron oxides or ochre, but there was no blue. Artistically, we have a lot of blue pigments in clothing and in paintings, but those are also really
Right.
rare and super expensive.
Yeah.
Indigo, of course, the plant-based dye, and then also ultramarine, ground from the lapis lazuli stone, worked beautifully in textiles and paintings, but not in skin. So, like, indigo would actually dissolve, and so the tattoo would just sort of fade and disappear
Fade.
over time.
Hmm,
And the ultramarine was too expensive.
yeah.
One time, it historically more valuable than gold, so that wasn't a common thing that people could find. And tattooing requires pigments that are biologically stable, so they need to be able
Yeah.
to be inserted into the skin and then stay for decades without
Yeah.
degrading or triggering a severe immune response.
I guess
And
if you wanted a temporary tattoo back in the day, you'd use the indigo plant and just
oh
be like,
yeah,
look at my cool tattoo. And then weeks or months later, be like, oh, that was just a temporary fake
we
one,
should we
like,
should we should try that. Let's
are
try out.
we?
Yeah,
Are we are
let's
we
make
going
indigo
gangbusters and saying,
tattoos.
let's get tattoos?
Temporary indigo
Temporary.
tattoos. Yeah, it wasn't really until advances in chemistry in the 20th made it possible to make a stable and safe tattoo ink. Okay, back to zinnias. I digress. Back to zinnias. I could talk about color forever. It's so
Future
fascinating.
podcast.
Yeah. Zinnias thrive, of course, in heat and tough conditions and neglect, which is perfect for beginners and anyone who wants a lot of color in their garden, and for people who want to garden, but just like a little. They bloom really quickly in as little as 6 to 8 weeks. You can find them in sizes ranging from 6-inch dwarf varieties to 4-foot high giant varieties. And they will definitely attract butterflies and bees and hummingbirds into your garden. Often called a cut and come again flower, if you cut a zinnia bloom, two or more new stems will often grow back, making them perfect for continuous bouquets of flowers in your house. But note, zinnias are known for making vase water really murky really quickly, so you'll want to change that water every few days. Do you do zinnias, Eric?
I
You
do. I feel
follow
like every year I do some form of zinnias. I've done zinnias where I've just kind of, I mean, when I was working on having a garden, I was mass planted a whole area of zinnias. I've actually seen in my neighborhood, there's someone that their boulevard strip, they just ground it all up and it's just zinnias. And it's like
Yeah,
gorgeous when
that
they
looks really
all
cool.
flower and it's all just multicolor even, so it's not like a certain
Mhm.
color scheme, but it looks gorgeous. But I've done it, yeah, in pairs. I think today I probably choose very specific colors and I like to interplant it within my perennial beds because it's again a later season flowering type for us. I like to add that like, extra color along with my dahlias and other things that'll be blooming in that time that are fun. Yeah, what about
Mhm.
you?
Yeah, I don't do them every year. I don't think I've done them for a couple years now, but I'm definitely feeling inspired after researching them to put some zinnias in this year. Probably
Yeah.
I'll stick to pink and purple maybe and my boulevard, a little pop here and there.
Yeah. There's so many zinnias out there and different color types and different seed growers that I feel like you can really get the gamut of very traditional, the crayon box color, to even just these ombre or even
Ooh, I love
metallic
that.
looking varieties that just have these other soft merging colors out of it. It's quite unique. And I will find hummingbirds many times on them as well as butterflies or other pollinators.
Definitely. And they're perfect for if you have a perennial garden and you have some blank spots at certain times of the year to kind of plug them in to add that color in a blank area or some, if you have an area that the bloom is really short and then you can always have a zinnia next to it, sort of fill in the space.
For sure.
Well, and there you have it. The journey of the zinnia from the wild fields of Mexico to the microgravity gardens of the International Space Station and into our backyards today.
All right, let's get into starting annual flowers from seed. So I thought first we just talk a little bit about like, why annuals from seed. And I should clarify, we're not going to talk about vegetables today. We actually will have a future podcast on that because I know people will be
Mhm.
wondering. And we already talked about perennials growing from seed. So check out that podcast as well. Today we're talking that bold, colorful, fill the beds, cut for the vase annuals. And there is something like incredibly satisfying about saying I grew that from seed. And beyond the pride factor, it makes sense like financially and creatively. I feel like we probably come across many times in designing a garden or helping others at the garden center when people are just putting a garden bed together and they're looking for a cheap way to create color or create more blooms within that garden. And I feel like annuals is the easy way to add instant color throughout the growing season. And then that way, when you have other plans of adding more perennials or trees or other things, you can continue to do that without feeling like you have to like complete it all at once, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You can buy seed packets for like a buck 75 to $3 to $5, depending on what you're buying. And that can produce dozens of plants, right? Compared to the 5, 10, or $20 and the actual plant already grown. You can get access to like so many different varieties. I know we were talking about zinnias, but you can find so many different other colors that you'll just never find in the specific plant choices that your garden center is carrying for you. So you can control that color palette. You can control bloom timing because you're controlling when you're planting them, and you can grow specialty cut flowers for bouquets that maybe have longer stems or go well in vases. And you can also do succession sowing for continuous blooms. So you kind of control when you have that seed part to do. So there's a special kind of confidence that happens when you buy 12 seed packets, and February you is like very ambitious, and then May you is like slightly overwhelmed, right? So it's all a fun experience we go through. So what's like the one annual you almost never buy as a finished plant because starting from seed just makes more sense? Anything for you come to mind?
I guess the first thing that came to my mind was sunflowers
Yeah,
because those are really easy to plant from seed, just direct sowing them into the ground.
yeah,
And I love those
absolutely.
sunflowers that come in red and black. I think those are really, really cool looking.
Yeah. Oh, those are cool. Yeah, for sure. Zinnias was one had on my mind. Marigolds, I feel like are so easy. I also have found geraniums, like just your annual geraniums, are so easy to grow. And they're super cute when they're really little and they have their little leaves. And I know you and Issa have a little thing against geraniums, but they are like super cute looking at you just before they're going to bloom. I'm just saying. And I think many times you can find anything your garden center is growing for annuals, you can find a seed. And sometimes some seeds are easier to grow as plants than others, right? Some require a lot more steps in order to really grow them, or their germination rate is a little low. And so sometimes I feel like when germination isn't easy, I will just buy those at the garden center. I always think of like Lysianthus takes a long time to one germinate and then grow and forever. For me personally, I just don't have time for that. So if I find it in a garden center, I will just buy it there where someone else has done the job for me, and then I'll enjoy the bloom. So I feel like you can think through different things and try different things. I was going to talk a little bit about timing and planning because I think that's really big when you're going to grow something from seed and you want it for the growing seasons. Timing makes or breaks seed starting. So most annual flowers should be started indoors about 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost date. And your seed packets will usually have this information, or honestly, you can Google it and Google will probably tell you the same. Some cool season flowers can go earlier, but heat loving ones, generally, you don't want to rush them and they may need more time. So starting too early is honestly probably one of the biggest mistakes, and something I know I've learned when I've grown seeds is that I just want to grow things. But the reality is, if I grow it too soon, it's gonna get bigger, and then I'm gonna have to pot it up, and I'm gonna have to do more work with it, and at some point, it needs to get outside because it's just too big to be indoors. It's not meant to be like an indoor plant, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
timing is so important. One, to save you the headache, but also is just better for the plant and what it'll do. It could stunt growth if you honestly keep something too long indoors in certain pots. Bigger is not always better, and overgrown seedlings become stress seedlings. You can think through staggering your sowing every 2 weeks for continuous blooms. So if you have different annuals that will bloom at one point and maybe take a while to regenerate and bloom again, you can kind of succession plant those. And so doing like an every 2 week piece can be one way to have those continuous blooms. And then the other planning you have to do is called hardening off. And that's not optional. If you're growing things indoors, you have to take a moment to introduce them to the wide world out there, and all the critters and wind and more intense sun and things they're going to have.
I like to use my front porch as, like, a transition zone so that they're kind
Yeah.
of outside, but still protected. The temperature shift isn't quite as extreme, but they get used to, night and day and a little wind, and then I move them outside after that.
Yeah, and that's perfect, right? And it's not a lot, but you do have to be patient with it. It is kind of a one week you introduce it for a few hours and then bring it back inside. And then the next
Mhm.
day or so you'll do just another hour. And then maybe push it a little more into the sun because more than likely they will probably burn because they're not used to that sun exposure, or cold temperatures. You still need to pay attention. Are you going to have any frosts or freezes coming through? You need to bring them back inside for that. And I think the other part is soil temperature is what matters more than the air temperature when transplanting. Typically, for a lot of flowers, you're waiting for that soil temperature to reach at least 50 degrees consistently. So having a soil thermometer is super helpful. Sometimes people say if you can stick your finger in the ground and it doesn't feel cold to you to the touch, that is more than likely ready. But I like to use a soil thermometer, and I'm checking as we go through our spring and we start to warm up and the soil starts to warm up. Sometimes it can take a while. Even though the outside temp may be like 60 or 70 degrees, does not mean that soil temperature is the same. It takes time to thaw, and if you live where we live, frozen about a foot down, so it's going to take a while for that ice cube to melt.
And sometimes it snows in April, as Prince told us.
Yes. Right. Yes. The other big thing I thought I'd talk about, because I think this is a big conversation for people, is lighting, right? And I do think you have to get it right to feel successful and ultimately not have leggy plants or plants that are stunted and gross. So I think that for me, window light is almost never enough. Even like a bright south facing window just doesn't provide the intensity or duration of a seedling needs in late winter or early spring. Do you agree with that, Anissa, or have you had success with things putting it just on a windowsill?
This is part of why I don't start a lot of seeds indoors anymore because I used to do that up in my studio and in my living room, and I was using the window light wasn't enough, and they always seemed kind of small and weak, and
Yeah,
I didn't invest in like getting lights for them, so I started buying a lot of more seedlings from the garden store down the street
yeah,
instead. But yeah, you need a lot
yeah,
of light.
yeah, you do. And otherwise, it needs to be a plant that's going to start out pretty quick and you can move it outside fairly quick after that. Because you
Like a
want
zinnia.
bright. Like the zinnia is a great one. You can also just direct sow that and not even grow it indoors. So you want bright light, and you also will need it close to the plants, only 2 to 3 inches above the seedlings. They also want 14 to 16 hours per day. So I know for my seedlings that I grow, I have timers and they're all adjusted to minimally give 14 to 16 hours. I actually think mine are 16. And it needs to be adjustable height because as they grow, you're going to need to move that light. So um, and shop lights, work beautifully, but you don't need like a $300 setup necessarily, but you do need usually some supplemental light when you're indoors. Other thing I'll talk briefly on is like standing spectrum. So I'm going to get really geeky here for everyone. So
Love it.
mainly in the blue and red spectrums, blue light or cool light promotes leafy compact growth and encourages strong stems and is essential for like early seedling development, right? And then red light or warm light encourages flowering and fruiting and supports overall plant energy and is important later in development. So it also helps if you're growing something else indoors that maybe is like something you want flowering indoors or fruiting even indoors. That kind of also helps you understand which light you may need more of. And then I think the other part, to talk about is the different types of bulbs, because I think everyone's like, "Which bulb do I use or get? Is one better than the other?" And I think the reality is, yes, some are better, and you can pay money for that. Full spectrum is like buying, I don't know, the Maserati of lights of sorts. In my mind, full spectrum grow lights mimics natural sunlight, and they contain both the blue and red wavelengths and often some green and far red light. Just kind of creates a balanced environment for plant growth. I also find I have full spectrum lights, so I'm fancy with my Maserati of lights. Um, and I don't have to move my lights. I can leave them exactly where they are, and I don't have to move it 2 to 3 inches away because it's the more it's intense enough as natural sunlight. I also find my hardening off process is less because I
Hmm.
feel like they've been exposed to basically those higher wavelengths and luminance. And so it's closer to sunlight. It's not exact. You still need to do a hardening off process. But I feel like I don't have as much burning, if at all. And I feel like I can more quickly move my seedlings out. That's just my experience.
That is so interesting about I did not know that different wavelengths affect different parts of the plant growth, like between
Yeah.
blue and red, and those are opposites, right? Like,
Hmm.
blue light has the shortest wavelengths and
Yeah.
red light has the longest wavelengths. Like, when you go that's why the sky is blue, right? That's why
My gosh,
water
Adisa, look how geeky we are.
I
Yes.
know. And when you go, like, underwater, the first color that starts to disappear is red. So that's why,
Yeah.
like, underwater photographers need to bring red lenses down to photograph fish and coral, because otherwise
Yes.
you wouldn't see half of the colors.
Yeah.
And also interestingly, if I wanna get into it, when we're
Yeah.
babies, we start out seeing black and white, and the first color we see is red. And then when we
Mm,
age and we start to lose our vision, the first color that
mm.
goes away is red.
Crazy. There you have it, folks. You didn't ask for it, but we just gave you a full tutorial on color and light. Yep, we went there. A lot of what people have, which is really a great bulb to use, is either like a fluorescent or an LED. And so a lot of people have what they call T5 or T8 fluorescent bulbs, which are super affordable, reliable. You can get them in many places. And there's good full spectrum options in those. The fluorescent is a little slightly higher energy use. So if you use an LED, as we've all learned, it's more energy efficient and has a longer lifespan. But both of them can have full spectrum or adjustable spectrum. Many times, if you just look at the box, you can see some of those things labeled on it, but you can just do a fluorescent T5 or T8 or LED light, and that's perfectly fine. Whatever works well for you will drive that consistency, which is important. So every gardener has at least one tray that looks like it's probably reaching for the sun in desperation. And so that could be lighting, or it could be the amount of light that you're giving it as well. So maybe you need a different light bulb to upgrade to. Maybe it needs to be closer to the plant, or maybe you need more hours. So I was going to just quickly mention kind of rapid fire common mistakes. You need like good seed starting soil. You can use regular soil. I just make sure it doesn't have any wood bark mulch pieces in it. So if it's a little bit finer is ideal. Overwatering, I think,
Mhm.
is
I'm so guilty of
so
this.
important, yet so hard, right?
It's so hard.
I feel you. Here's the thing, if this is your first time seed starting, I bet you're probably gonna overwater, and that's okay, right? And it could cause other issues, like some mildews and things that can occur on the soil top. You can have dampening off is what it's called, that has kind of affected your seedling, and which basically is like someone took it and pinched it at the bottom, and it just kind of flops over and it's gone. There's no coming back from that. So I think if you're an overwater, I think the best thing to do is get your mind a little more into like drying out a little bit is okay. They're not cactuses, but they don't need to be soggy and sitting in water. So it is important, I think, for plants to go through water moments and then, start absorbing that water and there's a little more dryness. I think when you see a little bit of the top of your soil looking a little dry, that can be a time. Sometimes lifting it up and just looking at the bottom to see is the bottom wet can help. So big one to watch for is overwatering. Make sure you label your plants because you'll forget what you planted. Airflow is probably the other one to remember that helps with overwatering and dampening off. So just a fan in the room, oscillating or what have you, will work wonders. And then fertilizing. So once your seedling has the first leaves you see will be these cotyledons that will show. They're not true leaves. You will see usually a second set of leaves that look more true to what the plant will have. And those are your first true leaves. That's when you can do light fertilizing. If you want to use seaweed fertilizer or other organic type fertilizers, you're fine. I usually use a water-based one that I mix up and I usually dilute it, maybe half the strength, and utilize that for fertilizing. It'll push your plants to grow even faster and be ready for blooming. Starting annual flowers from seed isn't about perfection. It's about giving your plants the right start and letting them do what they're designed to do. With good light, smart timing, and a little discipline, you can grow stronger, more vibrant flowers than you ever thought possible. And if you find yourself holding 12 seed packets again next year, just know you're in good company. Do we have a question today, Anissa?
Yes, we do. Let me see here. Okay. Sally writes in and asks, I bought some hellebores from Trader Joe's, but the flowers keep falling over limply. If I give them a little water, they'll stand back up, but only for about a day. I know I can't water them every day. What should I do?
All right, Sally. Here's what I'm going to tell you to do. Um, you said you bought these at Trader Joe's.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that from my experience, because I think one, that's like a really great tip if anyone doesn't know, like some of your grocers and whatever would bring in plants about this time in February, and they bring in hellebores as indoor plants, but they are the hellebores you can put out in your garden, and you'll
Mm-hmm.
get them at a way better price and they're nice and big. So,
Mm-hmm.
tip.
Top
So
tip.
I would say, from my experience, I know a lot of times those plants have been grown in their pots a longer time, so they're kind of root bound. So if you took it out of the black pot, you'd probably see there's lots of roots there, and maybe not as much soil. Sometimes that soil medium they use isn't great for maintaining water, and because your roots are taking over, it's basically sucking that water out right away. So I would probably, one, look to repot it. because it may not be time for you to plant it outside. If you can put it outside in the ground, that's obviously the best thing for it. And you'll still have to pay attention to it if you put it in the ground because it's still just absorbing from its pot size soil before it gets out into the native ground. Sometimes those pots have a lot of like sphagnum moss in it, and if that dries out, it's really difficult to get it to like reabsorb water that the plant needs. So sometimes submerging your plant in your bathtub or a big um, bucket or something, and leave it for like 30 minutes just to like
Oh,
absorb
wow.
as much, and then that can help. We used to do that a ton, I know, in annuals when we had plants that just all of a sudden looked really droopy. And to really revive them, we just left them in a bucket for like 30 minutes to an hour to absorb as much water as possible into that soil medium and into the plant. And that really worked too. So I would do that. I'd repot it and get it some new soil medium.
Great advice. If you have a gardening question you'd like us to answer, please write to us at petalandplot@gmail.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone you know and click the follow button to hear our next episode.
As garden designers here at Petal and Plot, we also offer year-round in-person and virtual gardening consultations and custom garden designs as well. Please reach out to us if you'd like to set one up. Want to see more of what we're up to? Follow us on Instagram at Petal and Plot. That's PETALNPLOT.